Well, hello, my name is Paul, and this video is being created to help our 2010 Fall Wednesday Night teachers prepare lesson plans that are going to be effective in teaching our bridge group people, our bridge group facilitators, and this video is also being created to help you transition lesson plans into facilitation questions to be used by bridge groups. Now, before I begin, let me encourage you that if you want to know more about some teaching techniques and some teaching ideas, I encourage you to go back and watch the Sunday School Teacher Training video that is also a part of this video series. So go back and watch that video if you want even more teaching from me in regards to how you put together a lesson plan. But we're going to go ahead and transition into some of the specifics that are going to be required in regards to preparing good lessons for your Wednesday night crowds as you teach through Westminster's new mission, vision, and purpose with the acronym FLOW, which means fortify, love your neighbor, open yourself up to your neighbor, and worship. The F, sorry, is fortify your faith. Fortify your faith, love your neighbor, open yourself up to your neighbor, and worship. So as you prepare to teach flow, I want to point something out immediately. You're not necessarily at a disadvantage, but your situation as a Wednesday night teacher is going to be a little different because instead of teaching a passage, you're going to be teaching a topic. So that means that instead of receiving a passage and poring over a passage, you've been given a topic, so now you are going to have to be the person who decides what passage to tie in to the topic. So for instance, let's say you are doing Fortify and you're going to be teaching about the importance of Bible study. Well, maybe you go over into 2 Timothy and you look at some of the things that Paul wrote to Timothy in regards to Scripture. Or maybe you are going to be teaching about prayer. Maybe you need to go over into the Psalms and see some of the prayers that were prayed by the psalmist, by the by the writer of the Psalms. So you're going to be given a topic, which means you're going to have to do the necessary work to discover the passages that you want to use to communicate the topic. Well, after you find the passages, take the time to properly study the passages. Ask God to help you understand what the passage is saying, and get out commentaries, get out Bible study software, do whatever is necessary to help you understand the passage that you will be teaching. And after you are given a topic, which you've already been given, after you discover the passage that you want to use with your topic, and after you pore over that passage to try to understand what God is saying in that passage, then you're able to sit down and write out a little mini lesson plan. Now I know you're going to be very tempted to just shoot from the hip because you're busy. Understand that. However, I strongly encourage you to take the time, even if it's 10 minutes, even if it's 5 minutes, to sit down and jot out a little lesson plan for your Wednesday night teaching experience. That's going to give you a game plan that you can follow. It's going to help you stay on track and on time because remember, you're only going to have 10 to 15 minutes of a lesson. And the beautiful thing about having a game plan is it helps you stay focused on where you're wanting to go. I've gotten up in front of people before and tried to teach a lesson without a lesson plan, and it ends up being very gray, very ambiguous, and students will leave the class with more questions than they do answers. So, let's transition into talking a little bit about the importance, let's transition and talk a little bit about how we can create good lesson plans for Wednesday night teaching. Well, I encourage you to take the time out to write down 3 goals. Then I encourage you to use what is called the hook, book, look, and took method in regards to your teaching. Why is it important to write down 3 goals? Well, I encourage you to have a know goal, I encourage you to have a feel goal, and I encourage you to have a do goal. Your know goal simply answers this question. What is it that I want my students to know as a result of this lesson? Your feel goal goes along the same lines. What is it that I want my students to feel as a result of this lesson? And your do goal does the same thing. What is it that I want my students to do as a result of this lesson? Well, now here's the challenge. Because you're not going to be teaching for 30 minutes and you're only going to be teaching for 10 to 15 minutes, I encourage you to write out the 3 goals, but really hone in on one of those goals. So for instance, let's say that you are teaching on discipleship and it is your goal for students to feel the importance of studying Scripture daily, and you want to really zero in on that. Then craft your hook, book, look, and took lesson plan around that one specific field goal. So what am I talking about when I say hook, book, look, and took? Well, picture this. Your students are going to be sitting down after they just have finished eating. Maybe they've taken their kids off to the nursery. Maybe they have kids downstairs with the youth and they got into an argument on the way to church about the fact that the homework wasn't finished. Your students' minds are most likely going to be everywhere as they sit down to prepare to listen to you. That means something has to happen within the first minute or two to grab their attention and hook them into the lesson. It can be short, it can be sweet, but most importantly, it has to hook their attention and get them thinking about what it is you're going to be teaching. So, for instance, I had a seminary professor one time who was teaching a Bible teaching class. He walks in and he says, "Okay, clear off your desks, we're going to have a pop quiz." And all of us frantically cleared off our desks, our heart rates were raised, and we started to panic because we had no idea we were going to have this pop quiz. So our desks were cleared off. Our teacher looks at us and he says this: "Now that I have your attention, let's begin class. Do whatever is necessary in a way that is tied into the lesson to hook them into what it is that you're going to be teaching." So after you spend a minute or two on the hook, transition into the book, which means you are going to be spending the next 7 to 8 to 9 to 10 minutes actually looking at what the passage of Scripture says that you've decided to use in order to teach your topic. Now, you can have students read out loud, you can have students read at their tables, you can have classroom discussion, you can have a mini lecture. Do whatever you feel is necessary in order to get students engaging in what the passage says. Now, I use the word students because you're going to be teaching. When I say students, what I mean is the adults that are going to be sitting under your teaching. So that's why I use the word students. So do whatever is necessary for students to engage Scripture in a way that's going to get them thinking about the truths of Scripture, in a way that's going to help them understand some of the background of the Scripture, some of the context of the Scripture. That's what the book portion of the lesson plan is about, actually helping them dive into Scripture. Now the caveat is that because this is a mini lecture, most likely you're going to be because it is 10 to 15 minutes long, you're most likely going to be doing a lot of mini lecturing. That is okay. Just make sure every now and then you ask questions or you use different teaching methods to make sure your students are still paying attention and they're still engaged to what you're teaching. Now, let me transition these last few minutes and talk about the look and the took, which, beyond just being called the look and took, this is the portion of your teaching where you're going to create facilitation questions for the bridge groups to use as they break out into their classes. The look of the lesson plan after the hook and the book helps students begin to ask, how do the truths of these passages, or how do the truths of this passage apply to my life in a broad and general way? So for instance, let's say that you're teaching on the topic of daily worship, and you're talking about Paul being poured out as a drink offering to the Lord. A question you could possibly ask is this, from a look standpoint. Have you seen people who every day wake up and live their lives as if it is a sacrifice to the Lord? If so, tell me what seeing those people encourages you to do in regards to your walk with Christ. Do you see how we took the lesson on Paul being poured out like a drink offering, and we turned that into a question that is broad and general, but yet very applicable? Have you seen people that have, or do you know people in your life that daily try to offer their lives as sacrifices to God? And if so, how do their lives impact your life as you try to follow Christ? So that's the look portion. And if you've noticed, we've taken the topic and we've transitioned it into a facilitation question. What about the took portion? Well, the took is asking the question, how do the passage or the truths of the passage specifically apply to my life? So for instance, again, let's say we're talking about Bible study and we see Paul talk to Timothy about being instant in season and out of season and preaching the word constantly. A question you could ask is this: do you find it difficult or easy to study the Bible on a daily basis? Now, we're running out of time. I want to encourage you to, after this video is over, go ahead and transition into part 2, and we're going to take 2-3 more minutes and finish talking about the necessity to create good facilitation questions.